Sir Richard Vernon was an English landowner, MP and Speaker of the House of Commons. Background and early life. He was born into a long-established, well-to-do family based at Haddon Hall in Derbyshire, the eldest son of Richard Vernon and Joan Vertrees, daughter of Sir Rhys ap Grufford of Llansadran and Abermarley, Carmarthenshire, and Wychner, Staffordshire. His father died when he was 10 years old, so he did not come into his estates until 11 years later. By this time he had already married Benedicta de Ludlow of Tong, Shropshire. Landowner. Vernon's property was widespread and varied. From his parents he inherited, in Cheshire, the forestership of Macclesfield Forest, and the manors of Marpy and Wibbersley. In Staffordshire, estates around Draycott, Harleston and Pipe Ridware. In Derbyshire, estates around Bagwell, Baslow, Calver, Haddon, Netherseal and Rowsley. In Pembrokeshire, the manors of Stackpole, Lydor, Bosheston and Rydbaxton. In Carmarthenshire, the manors of Pendine and Canterwan. In Buckinghamshire, the manors of Pitchcott and Adstock, including advowsons of the churches. In Westmoreland, the manors of Meeburn, Wolds and Newby, and there were also scattered lands in Cumberland. In addition to this patrimony, the death of his paternal grandmother, Juliana de Pembrokeshire, brought him lands formerly belonging to her brother, Fulk de Pembrokeshire, who was also his wife's stepfather, in Shropshire, the manor of Tong, together with Tong Castle. In Leicestershire, the manor of Ayleston. Sir Fulker's second wife, Isabel of Lingen, who was also Vernon's mother-in-law, had founded a chantry and college of a warden and 4 chaplains at Tong to pray for the souls of her 3 husbands. She bequeathed advowson of the church to Vernon, and also settled her manor of Hazelbitch, Northamptonshire, on him. In 1415, prior to launching his invasion of France, Henry V induced Parliament to dissolve all alien priories, monastic houses subsidiary to abbeys in France. This included Lapley Priory, a small Benedictine house on the western edge of Staffordshire. Its lands were given to Tong College, greatly improving the income of the chaplains and putting the chantry on a much more secure footing. It is possible that this was brought about by a member of the House of Beaufort, the king's cousins, to whom Sir Fulk had been very close. Tong Church was to become a shrine for the Vernon family, accommodating generations of elaborate tombs. Vernon also tried to acquire the substantial estates of Sir Fulker's first wife, Margaret Trussell, which had been settled on Isabel for life. The legal wrangles with the Trussell family dragged on inconclusively for more than 20 years. Career. Vernon was advanced £45 by the Exchequer in June 1416 to cover service in France, in which he was engaged for a few months. £40 a year was considered sufficient to support a knight, while £9 would pay an archer. So it is possible Vernon campaigned with a small force. If so, the most likely destination was Harfleur, where the English garrison was left stranded after the Agincourt campaign. The Armagnac besiegers were scattered in a daring relief operation, led by John of Lancaster, 1st Duke of Bedford, on the 15th of August. This fits well with Vernon's subsequent career, as he must have returned to the Midlands by November. In November 1416, Vernon was pricked High Sheriff of Staffordshire. That period of office was followed by a knighthood, and he was appointed Justice of the Peace for Staffordshire, a post he held for 5 years. He was then chosen as one of the arbitrators in a dispute between the Abbot of Burton Abbey and Thomas O'Cover, a quarrelsome Derbyshire landowner and politician. He was twice appointed Sheriff of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, in 1425 and 1426, and was made High Sheriff of Staffordshire again in 1427. Vernon became a Member of Parliament for the first time in 1419 as a Knight of the Shire for Staffordshire. He was one of a number of Derbyshire magnates who were summoned early in 1420 to Westminster to discuss the defence of Normandy. His services to the Crown extended to advancing a loan of £52 in concert with the Essex landowners, Sir William Coggeshall and Richard Vernon, who became Speaker the following year. 1421 marked the high point of Henry V's French campaigns, with Normandy under firm English control. The king wed to Catherine of Valois, the French king's daughter, and English forces pressing south and east of Paris. However, Henry died in 1422, leaving an infant son to succeed him. Vernon represented Derbyshire in the Parliament of 1422, the first of Henry VI's reign. In the following year he was appointed Steward of the Duchy of Lancaster's estates in the High Peak, Derbyshire. He represented Derbyshire again in the Parliament of 1426 and was elected Speaker of the House of Commons. The Parliament met at Leicester Castle and was called the Parliament of Bats because members were forbidden to wear swords for fear of violence, and so carried clubs or bats. The key issue was the power struggle between the boy king's relatives, Cardinal Beaufort and Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester. Vernon had links with the Beauforts and their influence may have secured him the speakership and possibly the stewardship of the High Peak. If this was so, he must have proved a disappointment, as the Parliament largely favoured Gloucester. However, he was able to advance his own interests considerably. Ralph Neville, 2nd Earl of Westmoreland, was a minor and a ward of the king. He petitioned the House for an increased allowance and his request met with approval. Vernon was a tenant of the Earl and also held the manor of Ashford in Bagwell, Derbyshire, at a farm of £42 during the minority of the Earl, so he stood to gain from this measure. He was even delegated to handle the actual payments to Neville. Vernon became involved in serious disturbances during the 1433 elections in Derbyshire. Henry, Lord Grey of Codnor, formerly a friend of Vernon, brought a force of 200 men to Derby on the 24th of June, intending to dictate the outcome of the election. Next day Vernon and Sir John Cockayne, a notoriously violent landowner from Ashbourne, arrived with a much larger force and had themselves declared members of Parliament. The clash became linked to a property dispute between Thomas Foljambe of Chesterfield, a client of Vernon, and Sir Henry Pierpont of Home Pierpont Hall. Foljambe's retainers launched a murderous attack on Pierpont and his men in Chesterfield Parish Church. Sessions of Oyer and Terminer were held at Derby in 1433 to investigate the affair. The first jury to sit was headed by Pierpont himself and naturally held Foljambe responsible for the whole dispute. A second jury included Vernon and Cockayne, and was more sympathetic to Foljambe. Ultimately, no resolution was reached. Within 4 years, Vernon and Grey were on good terms again, engaged in joint enterprises. Vernon was elected in 1436 to represent Derbyshire in the Parliament of 1437 without undue drama. Powerful though he was, Vernon felt the need of backing from even more powerful magnates in times of conflict. From 1430 he was increasingly linked with Humphrey Stafford, who was to become Duke of Buckingham in 1444. In 1440, Vernon made a formal agreement with Stafford, agreeing to support him with a retinue of 6 mounted men. For this, he was to receive a life annuity of £20. The alliance fitted with Vernon's wider connections. Stafford was also loosely allied to the House of Beaufort and was to be crucial in the arrest and overthrow of Gloucester in 1447. The Stafford connection was to prove crucial in advancing Vernon's subsequent career. Stafford protected him against the growing tide of complaints about his maladministration and oppression in the High Peak. As Marcher Lord of Brecon, Stafford was also able to open up preferment for Vernon in South Wales, where he already had considerable interests. Vernon was a deputy justiciar of South Wales under James, Lord Audley, and during 1440–45 itinerant justice in the lordship of Brecon. By 1445 was serving as Knight Steward in the court of the Lord High Constable, another office occupied by Humphrey Stafford, now Duke of Buckingham, as well as in the court of the Earl Marshal, another magnate whom Vernon cultivated. In June 1450 he was appointed Sheriff of Pembroke, Llanstefan and St Clears for life. He also became Constable of Pembroke Castle and Tenby Castle and secured numerous profitable stewardships in the region. However, there were tensions between Vernon and his patrons, particularly as Buckingham was also allied with Sir William Trussell, with whom Vernon conducted a protracted and sometimes violent feud. Buckingham had become Constable of Calais by 1444, and he was undoubtedly responsible for Vernon's appointment as Treasurer of Calais in 1445 and as Receiver and Keeper of the Calais Mint in the following year, posts he held until the year of his death. However, they were a mixed blessing. As treasurer, Vernon ran up large debts, for which he was held personally responsible. On his death in August 1451, these passed to his eldest surviving son and successor, William, who had already succeeded him as treasurer. The Crown seized Harleston as security, and it seems that William never managed fully to meet his father's debts. Marriage and family. Richard Vernon married Benedicta Ludlow. She was the daughter of Sir John Ludlow of Hodnett, Shropshire, and Isabel de Lingen, the foundress of the Chantry and College of Tong. They had at least 4 sons and 4 daughters. These include Richard, Vernon's original heir, who predeceased him, and whose widow retained a large life interest in the Vernon estates; Sir William, his eldest surviving son, who inherited his main estates, some of his offices and debts; Fulk, who was joint steward of High Peak with Vernon and captain of Mam's Castle in the Calais Pale; John, who became High Sheriff of Pembrokeshire; Benedicta, who married Sir Thomas Charlton, soon to be Speaker; Elizabeth, who married the Attorney General John Vampage of Worcester. She married secondly to Sir John Stanley of Elford. They had issue Agnes, who married John Cockayne of Ashbourne; Margaret, who married Richard Longueville;